people would always ask me about, oh, is this guy a good guy or a bad guy about Warriors players? And I would say the same thing. I could tell you something about every one of these guys you care about that would make you dislike them or make you like them, right? Because they're human beings, and I've been around them a lot, and there's a lot of gray area. I could tell you a story that makes Steph sound like a snooty rich kid, and I could obviously tell a story that makes him sound like the greatest guy because he often was that. But it's complicated, and being a superstar is a complicated thing, and they get jaded over time. I'm sure you've seen that. I'm sure you've seen rookies come in bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and just the nature of fame and attention. They get a little bit of bitterness, a little bit of short with the temper. It changes over time. And they know that, I think. They know they have those vulnerabilities. I could say that about every player I covered, except for maybe Kevon Looney. I never saw Kevon do anything, never saw him say a bad word to anybody. So he might be a little bit different than some of the others. And I think what they lose in that, when they try to do the whole Players Tribune of we're going to tell our own stories, is that they're not always the best judges of what's interesting to other people, right. Number one. And number two, sometimes people like your flaws. I mean, you want to hide your flaws, but sometimes people like that. I've brought up Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan was furious at Sam Smith. I don't think he expected that people would go, oh, I kind of like that. Right. I kind of like that he's ruthless. Right. You know, I always make the analogy to I get some guff, we should say, about this, about that because American Hustle wasn't that good a movie, but they talk about the perfume. I like when they talk about how the perfume always has a little something nasty in it. Right, that's a little bit alluring and a little bit something rotten with a very nice citrus. You know, people are drawn to it, but that's not necessarily something you trust the public to just absorb and put out there in the world. And so I think they almost lose something in the representation of their league when they're trying to sanitize it, but I understand why they want to sanitize it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I get, you know, we're in the public eye, I'm in the public eye. And one thing you have to have thick skin and sometimes just avoid stuff. Like I'm not all on social media looking at my mentions and what people are saying and things like that. One, I'm older and I'm not from the social media generation, but also I don't think that's necessarily healthy. You know, one of the great quotes I've heard is human beings are not created for excessive criticism or excessive praise. Yeah. Either one can really damage you. And so I do think, and I get it. And you've even seen media members who have, you know, in their careers been very critical of athletes, and that's fine. And then because they're media stars or whatever, when they get criticized by other media or whoever, they get upset.
Yeah.
And it's like, wait a minute, we expect the athletes to just take it, you know, and you write something critical about them. And then you walk into the locker room and you expect it to be like, yo, what's up, man? Hey, you know, like they're not going to have any reaction. And that's again, these are things that I think about and I just try to be fair. And sometimes I can understand why an athlete might be mad. And, you know, you just have to deal with those things. There's a time to critique and be critical of athletes, pundits, people, whatever it might be.
Yeah, I had that experience with Kevin Durant where when he went after me for saying that he was going to leave the Warriors and he lashed out at me in a press conference and called me out and everything else. And people asked me about that experience and how I felt about him. And it was weird because I felt this sense of empathy. It was strange. I still believed everything I said. Right. And I still felt like he wasn't handling the situation in the right way. And I still feel that way. But when it happened, I suddenly had the uncomfortable scenario of being in the news and turning on ESPN. And I'm watching people debate whether I'm good at my job. And they're debating it out just on television. And I'm rooting for the guy who's defending me. And I'm angry at the guy who's criticizing me. And I'm feeling insane. And I'm going, oh, my God. This is how these dudes live. Yeah. This is how they live. No wonder some of them are crazy. I mean, I would go crazy if this was my existence. And so,
That's
I
a
mean,
great point. That is
it
a great.
affords me nothing. Hey,
Well, and
yeah,
I think, Ethan, that unfortunately, and you heard, remember a few years ago, Kyrie Irving, or actually Adam Silver, said how he was surprised that so many players were unhappy. And then
yeah,
Kyrie Irving agreed with him and said, yeah, a lot of guys are unhappy. I think part of it, and I'm not blaming this on the media is what makes these guys larger than life. If it wasn't for the media, television, radio, social media now, writers, reporters, they would just be some guys playing basketball, you know what I mean? And not making the money that they're making. So media is a necessary component of it. We make them larger than life to a certain degree. We have a role in it. But I think that the constant scrutiny does take away some of their ability to enjoy it. And that's why if I was an NBA player or NFL, whatever, I would really not even pay attention to the social media, to the newspapers and things like that. For the most part, I'd have my team that had to let me know something I needed to know. But that can steal your joy, that was a great example of what these guys go through constantly. I've given Kevin Durant some credit. You know, a lot of people think he's kind of weak-minded because he's responding to who knows who, 15-year-olds in their mother's basement on Twitter or whatever. But I've said this, I've been like, look, for him to take in all the social media he does and it not affect his ability on the court, that's pretty impressive that he can do that. Because a lot of guys, it would get in your head what people are saying and the criticism. And I give him credit for that. I do think some of the stuff's just unnecessary for him to do. But that takes a certain level of strength to be able to go out there and hear all the noise and still perform at your best. So, but I do think that it makes it tougher on the players. And social media has been a huge part of that, that, not just the traditional media.
Well, I think you've got an advantage over some people just by being old enough to not have been raised within it, because I think for a lot of people, it's inconceivable that you would be plugged out of it. And I do wonder if it's a factor. There should be a generation of people coming up as TV stars and media stars. And I almost wonder if it's not happening because that kind of experience might give you rabbit ears to a certain extent. It's a big advantage to be a Charles Barkley and really not care. Right. And have a sense of yourself outside of this thing. A lot of other people, they almost feel like who they are and their self-worth, it's really determined by what everybody says on these platforms. And when your self-worth predates social media, I think it can be a big advantage as an opinionist in the public eye.
Yeah, because you're just not caught up in what everybody thinks about your take. You're really just saying what you want to say. I used to think about child actors growing up in Hollywood or even musicians, but like your whole kind of self-worth could be locked up into what others think of you. You might think a song you did is tremendous, and then if nobody likes it or if your A&R or whatever doesn't like it, now, you have to go back to the drawing board. So a lot of your value is in what other people think about you and say about you. And now it's not just actors and musicians and stuff. A lot of people, just regular people, are growing up constantly concerned and worried about what others think about them. And that's a challenge for humans in general. But now with social media, where you're constantly comparing yourself to others and others are constantly commenting on you, that's challenging. And all the studies that talk about the detriments of social media and the effect that they're having negatively on people's mental health.